What if everything you think you know about who you are is completely wrong? What if the person staring back at you in the mirror, the voice in your head claiming to be you, doesn't actually exist the way you think it does? And what if understanding this one truth could completely revolutionize how you experience reality itself? Right now, you're operating under a massive assumption that there's someone home behind your eyes, a central control tower, a you making choices, remembering your past, planning your future, worrying about tomorrow. But here's what they don't teach you in school. That entire experience of being the one in charge is actually an illusion, a sophisticated trick your brain plays on itself. And the moment you really see through it, everything changes. This isn't some abstract philosophy. This is cutting-edge neuroscience meeting ancient spiritual wisdom, and what they're both saying will blow your mind. Let me show you what I mean. Scientists once watched a chimpanzee wake up from anesthesia with a red dot painted on its forehead. When they put the animal in front of a mirror, something remarkable happened. The chimp didn't reach toward the reflection, it reached toward its own forehead. That moment, science called it the birth of self-awareness. The moment consciousness recognized itself as separate from everything else. But here's the twist nobody talks about. What if that wasn't consciousness discovering itself? What if that was the exact moment the illusion began? What if learning to recognize yourself in a mirror is actually when you start mistaking the reflection for reality? Think about your morning routine. You look in the mirror and see someone familiar, someone continuous, a person who seems to have this unbroken thread connecting yesterday to today to tomorrow. But what you're actually seeing is just light bouncing off a surface, creating patterns your brain interprets as a face. The real question isn't what you're seeing, it's who is doing the seeing. And this is where modern neuroscience gets absolutely wild. Dr. Michael Gazzaniga studied patients whose brain hemispheres had been surgically separated. What he discovered should shake everything you believe about having a unified self. When the connection between the hemispheres was cut, two completely different streams of consciousness emerged in the same skull. One hand would do something, while the other hand tried to stop it. Two separate wills operating in the same body, each thinking it was in control. Stop and think about that. If you believe you're one singular consciousness, which hemisphere was the real you? The left, the right, or were they both just different expressions of something far more mysterious? This research suggests that even in your intact brain right now, what you call you might already be multiple competing processes just pretending to be one unified self. But it gets even more disturbing. Dr. Benjamin Libet's experiments measured brain activity during decision making and found something incredible. Your brain starts preparing for movement up to half a second before you're consciously aware you've decided to move. Let that land for a second. Your brain is already acting before the conscious you even knows you've made a choice. That feeling of, I decided to do this? That's not you commanding your actions. That's your brain sending you a notification after the decision's already been made. The sense of being in control, of being the one choosing. It's all an elaborate story your brain tells itself to maintain the illusion of a unified self. Drop a comment if this is already shifting how you see yourself. I want to know what's landing for you. Now you might be thinking, but I know who I am because I remember who I've been. Your memories create that sense of continuity, right? Here's the problem. Dr. Elizabeth Loftus proved that memories aren't recordings, they're reconstructions. Every single time you remember something, you're rebuilding it from fragments, and those fragments can be altered, corrupted, or completely fabricated without you ever knowing. People develop crystal clear memories of childhood events that never happened, complete with emotions, sensory details, everything. If the foundation of your identity, your personal history, can be this unreliable, how solid is the self that depends on it? Consider what happens every night. You go to sleep, and for hours, the self completely vanishes. No sense of being you, no experience, no continuity. Then you wake up and just assume the person gathering those memory fragments is the same one who went to sleep. But what actually connects the you who falls asleep with the you who wakes up? Only memory. And memory, as we've just established, is completely unreliable. This understanding isn't new. Buddhist philosophy has been pointing to this for over 2,000 years with the teaching of anatta, no self. They describe the self like a river that appears continuous, but is never actually the same water from moment to moment, or like a flame that looks steady, but is constantly being renewed by fresh fuel. The appearance of continuity masks a constant process of arising and dissolving. Modern cognitive science now confirms this ancient wisdom. Your identity isn't a fixed thing, it's a dynamic process. Every time you recall a memory, it gets modified before being stored again. Your mind is constantly editing and rewriting the story of who you are. The you that exists right now will remember today's events differently next month. So which version is real? The answer: both are equally illusory, just stories created in the moment of remembering. This means the continuous self you experience is more like a movie than a photograph. Each frame connects to the next, creating the illusion of smooth motion. But there's no single unchanging thing that persists through the whole sequence. What you call yourself is a process, not a thing. A verb pretending to be a noun. Now let's go quantum. Modern physics reveals something extraordinary. At the quantum level, particles don't exist in definite states until they're observed. The act of observation literally collapses infinite possibilities into one single reality. Observer and observed are so intimately connected, they cannot be separated. Consciousness isn't just witnessing reality, it's participating in creating it. Your brain works the same way. It doesn't passively receive information about an external world. It actively constructs your experience based on sensory input, memory, expectations, and beliefs. What you call the world is actually your brain's best guess about what's happening, updated moment by moment based on incomplete information. Colors don't exist in objects. They're interpretations of electromagnetic wavelengths. The solidity of matter is a construction allowing you to interact with quantum fields in useful ways. Even your visual field, which seems seamless and complete, is assembled from fragments with massive blind spots your brain fills in automatically. Neuroscientist Anil Seth calls this a controlled hallucination, so stable and consistent you rarely notice its constructed nature. But here's the ultimate question. If your entire experienced world is generated by your brain, who is it being generated for? Who's the audience for this elaborate production? Who is witnessing this controlled hallucination you call reality? Ancient wisdom traditions have always pointed toward this mystery. Zhuangzi famously wondered if he was a man dreaming he was a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming he was a man. When advanced meditators quiet their brain's default mode network through deep practice, something extraordinary happens. The sense of being a separate self begins to dissolve. But awareness itself doesn't disappear. Instead, it reveals itself as boundless, centerless, without beginning or end. This is the heart of it. If perception is a controlled hallucination, if memory is unreliable, if the self is just a story, then what you imagine is behind your eyes isn't actually there. The self is part of the construction, not the constructor. What remains when the story stops is pure awareness itself, the silent space where thoughts, emotions, sensations, and even the sense of self arise and dissolve. Here's what changes everything. Every attempt to find the thinker behind thoughts reveals the same truth. Thoughts simply appear in awareness, hang around for a while, then dissolve back into silence. There's no central headquarters manufacturing them, no CEO of consciousness giving orders. Emotions surge through experience, like weather patterns through the sky, powerful, temporary, with no permanent source. Physical sensations rise and fall in endless waves, but there's no fixed experiencer they belong to. Even the sense of being the observer, the me watching it all, flickers and shifts. Sometimes it feels solid, sometimes transparent, sometimes it vanishes entirely. The harder you look for something permanent behind the stream of experience, the more it disappears. What you discover instead is awareness itself. Not personal awareness, not your awareness, but awareness as the fundamental ground where all experience appears. Take a moment right now and drop this phrase in the comments. I am the space, not the content. This isn't just words. It's an energetic declaration, an interruption in the loop of identification, a signal to the quantum field that you're ready to see beyond the illusion of separation. Comment it below and feel the shift as you type it. This is how we begin to wake up together. So if free will is an illusion, if the self is just a story, if you're not actually the one behind your eyes, then who or what is running the show? Who's responsible for everything unfolding in your life right now? Ancient traditions have been wrestling with this for thousands of years. The Greeks talked about fate as invisible threads woven into human existence. Hindu philosophy described karma as this intelligent unfolding of cause and effect, operating way beyond what any individual mind can comprehend. And now, modern science is approaching the same conclusion from a completely different direction. What if what you experience as personal choice is actually the localized expression of a much larger intelligence? What if what feels like your individual will is actually the universe expressing itself through the unique configuration of awareness showing up as your particular nervous system? The sense of being a separate self, making independent decisions, might be the most convincing illusion consciousness ever created just to navigate physical reality. But quantum mechanics reveals something even wilder about the nature of reality and consciousness itself. In quantum field theory, empty space isn't actually empty. It's alive with virtual particles constantly popping into and out of existence. This quantum foam, This field of infinite potential is literally the ground from which all matter and energy emerge, and consciousness operates on eerily similar principles. Think about it. Thoughts don't arise from a thinker. They emerge from the field of awareness, like quantum fluctuations appearing from the vacuum. Emotions don't belong to an experiencer. They're temporary disturbances in the field of consciousness, arising and dissolving back into the silence they came from. What you've been calling your experience is actually more like localized turbulence in an infinite ocean of awareness. And this isn't just a beautiful metaphor. Research in quantum biology is revealing that biological systems, including your brain, may actually operate using quantum mechanical principles. The microtubules in your neurons might function as quantum computers, processing information in superposition states before collapsing into classical neural activity. If consciousness emerges from quantum processes, then the boundary between observer and observed becomes even more blurred than we imagined. Let me break down what this means for your identity. In quantum mechanics, particles exist in multiple states simultaneously until observation collapses the wave function into a single outcome. What if your sense of being a definite solid self is actually consciousness, collapsing infinite possibilities into the appearance of a singular identity? What if the you think you are is just one potential configuration among countless others, temporarily stabilized by the act of observing yourself? Drop a comment if this is already making your brain hurt in the best way possible. This actually explains some really mysterious aspects of being human. Have you ever noticed how your personality completely shifts depending on who you're with? How you can feel like totally different people in different contexts? Most people think this is just social adaptation. But what if these are actually glimpses of the quantum nature of identity itself? What if the coherent self you imagine is more like a probability cloud, temporarily collapsed into a specific configuration by whatever's happening in the moment? The ancient Indian text, the Yoga Vasistha, describes this beautifully. Consciousness is like an ocean, and individual minds are like waves, appearing separate and distinct, but never actually divided from the water that forms them. Each wave has its own shape, its own movement, its own temporary identity, but it's still just ocean appearing as wave. Similarly, what you call your individual consciousness is actually infinite awareness appearing as a localized perspective, a temporary focal point in the field of consciousness. This understanding completely transforms how you relate to thoughts and emotions. When a disturbing thought shows up, you don't have to identify with it or push it away. You can recognize it as a temporary perturbation in the field of awareness, no more personal than a wave is separate from the ocean. When intense emotions surge through your experience, you don't have to be overwhelmed or try to resist them. You can see them as weather patterns moving through the sky of consciousness, powerful, meaningful, but temporary. Now let's address the massive question everyone asks at this point. If the self behind your eyes is an illusion, what happens to personal responsibility? What happens to growth, healing, the whole idea of working on yourself? This is where people get stuck. They think recognizing the illusory nature of the self means nothing matters, that effort is pointless, that everything's predetermined. This is a fundamental misunderstanding, and I want to clear it up right now. Recognizing there's no fixed self doesn't mean patterns don't exist. or that transformation is impossible. It actually reveals transformation as the natural state of consciousness. Without a fixed self to defend or maintain, change becomes effortless, flowing, organic. The river doesn't struggle to flow. It simply follows the natural contours of the landscape. Similarly, when you stop trying to be someone specific, you become available to the intelligence of the moment. Here's what most people completely miss. The ego mind isn't the enemy to be destroyed. It's actually a remarkable evolutionary achievement, a specialized function of consciousness that allows for survival, learning, and navigation in the physical world. The problem isn't the ego's existence. It's the mistaken identification with it as your true self. It's like confusing the software running on a computer with the hardware itself, or mistaking the character in a video game for the player holding the controller. When you recognize that the personal self is more like a sophisticated interface than your actual identity, everything becomes workable. Psychological patterns can be observed and transformed because there's no one defending them anymore. Limiting beliefs can dissolve because there's no solid self they need to define. Emotional wounds can heal because there's no permanent entity carrying them forward into every future moment. The very things that seem most solid about your identity become the most fluid. Think about the implications of this. Right now, you might be carrying stories about who you are. I'm anxious. I'm not good with money. I always sabotage relationships. These feel like permanent features of your identity. But if there's no fixed self, these are just temporary patterns moving through awareness. They can shift, dissolve, transform completely because they were never actually you to begin with. Comment below with one pattern or belief you've been carrying that you're ready to see as temporary rather than permanent. Let's witness this shift together. What we've explored today is really just scratching the surface of what becomes possible when you begin to live as witness consciousness rather than the separate self. The recognition that you are awareness itself opens doorways to what I call the master frequencies, 9 distinct transmission states that allow consciousness to broadcast itself through your being with complete coherence.
But that's a whole other level we'll explore next. For now, sit with this understanding. You're not the wave trying to become a better wave. You're the ocean temporarily appearing as wave. And the ocean is already whole, already complete, already infinite in its potential.
If this resonates, let me know in the comments. And if it's challenging everything you thought you knew about yourself, that's exactly where the transformation begins. What we've explored today reveals the foundation of who you truly are, but there's an entire system for actually embodying this recognition, for moving from the frequency prison of separation into effortless creation as the field itself. This is why ancient traditions developed practices like meditation, contemplation, and self-inquiry, not to improve the self, but to see through the illusion of the self, not to make the ego better, but to recognize what you are beyond the ego. When you truly see that you are the awareness in which all experience appears, the question shifts. It's no longer, how do I fix myself? It becomes, how can this understanding be embodied more fully? How can life be lived from this recognition rather than from the story of separation? And here's something remarkable that happens when this shift begins to stabilize. The world starts to feel less like a place you're separate from and more like an extension of your own being. Other people stop feeling like separate entities you need to defend against or impress. They start feeling like different expressions of the same consciousness you are. Problems don't disappear, but they're held in a larger context that makes them workable rather than overwhelming. Relationships completely transform when you recognize there's actually only one consciousness appearing as many. The person you're talking to isn't separate from you. They're another localization of the same awareness you are. Conflict becomes less about defending separate positions and more about consciousness recognizing itself through apparent difference. Love stops being something you do for another person and becomes the recognition of what you share at the deepest level. This shift also transforms your relationship with time and mortality. When you recognize that you are not the temporary form, but the eternal awareness in which forms appear and disappear, death loses its grip on you. The body will dissolve. The personality will fade. The memories will be forgotten. But what you truly are was never born and will never die. You begin to see that you've never actually been in a body. Bodies appear in you, in consciousness, like images appearing on a screen. This isn't a belief system or a philosophical position. This is the direct recognition of what's actually happening right now. The words appearing on the screen are appearing in your awareness. The sounds in your environment are arising in consciousness. The sensations in your body are modifications of the same awareness that recognizes thoughts and emotions. There's no separate you having these experiences. There's just experiencing itself, knowing itself, being itself. Let me give you a practical way to investigate this directly right now. Notice that you're aware of these words. Now notice that you're also aware of the awareness that's aware of the words. Can you find a boundary between the awareness and what it's aware of? Can you locate the supposed observer separate from the observed? The more clearly you look, the more obvious it becomes. Awareness and its contents are not two different things. They're one seamless experiencing, appearing as the dance between knower and known. This recognition doesn't require special states of consciousness or years of meditation practice. It's available right now, as obvious as the sky, as intimate as your next breath. The only thing obscuring it is the habit of looking for it as if it were an object in awareness, rather than awareness itself. It's like trying to see your own eyes. Impossible when you're looking for them. Obvious when you stop looking and simply see. Comment below if you just caught that recognition, even for a split second. That's the shift happening in real time. But even as this illusion crumbles, something undeniable remains. Right now, there is awareness present. Something registering these words appearing in your visual field. Something recognizing the rhythm of breath moving through your body. Something witnessing the arising and dissolving of thoughts. This awareness is not the thinker, not the doer, not the collection of memories forming an identity. It doesn't belong to the passing phenomena appearing within it. Yet it holds them all. When the story of the separate self dissolves into the flickering construction it always was, awareness doesn't vanish. It remains steady, silent, unchanging. So the question deepens even further. If the thinker isn't really thinking, if the actor isn't actually acting, if the one behind your eyes is just another appearance in consciousness, then what is it that recognizes all of this? If this exploration is touching something deep in you, something that feels more true than the stories you've been telling yourself, then I invite you to subscribe, not just to this channel, but to this frequency. This isn't about consuming content. It's about staying coherent with a truth that transforms everything once you really see it. It's about joining a community of people willing to question the most fundamental assumptions about identity and consciousness. The answer to who you really are cannot be found in the familiar story of me. That story is itself just another appearance in awareness, no more permanent than a passing cloud. What endures is the witness itself, the space in which thought, memory, choice, and identity all rise and fall. Unlike the flickering self-image, this witness doesn't come and go. It was here before your personal story began, and it will remain long after that story ends. Think about this. You've never actually seen your own face except through reflections. You've never heard your true voice except as it echoes back through the world. You've never caught the thinker in the act of creating a thought before it appears in awareness. The you imagine sitting behind your eyes, watching this unfold, has never been directly observed, and yet something has always been present, an awareness in which every thought, every sensation, every emotion appears and disappears. That awareness is not part of your personal story. It's the stage on which all stories unfold. Through every change in your life, every transformation of body, every shift in personality, every forgotten memory and new experience, awareness has been the one constant, present during joy, during sorrow, during confusion, during clarity, even during sleep, when the personal self completely dissolves. It doesn't change as your identity changes. It simply witnesses. Different wisdom traditions have pointed to the same recognition using different language. Vedanta calls it Sat Chit Ananda, existence, consciousness, bliss. Zen refers to it as original mind or Buddha nature. Sufi mysticism speaks of it as the face of the divine. Each tradition uses its own conceptual framework, but they're all pointing to the same silent presence that you are before you tell yourself who you are. When this presence is truly recognized, not just intellectually understood, but directly experienced, the illusion of separation begins to dissolve. The you behind your eyes is revealed as just another temporary appearance within awareness, no more substantial than a passing thought or emotion. What you discover is that you are not the character in the story. You're not even the author of the story. You are the awareness in which stories appear and disappear. What you truly are is the witness itself, boundless, indivisible, utterly intimate with all experience while belonging to none of it. The same awareness that seems to shine through your eyes is the same awareness shining through every being, every expression of consciousness. It wears countless forms, but is never divided. It appears as billions of separate selves, but is actually one seamless recognition appearing to itself in infinite ways. This understanding completely transforms how you relate to everything. When you see that you are not the one behind your eyes, but rather the awareness in which eyes and worlds appear, the whole game changes. Problems don't disappear, but the one who was supposed to solve them is revealed as another appearance in consciousness. Thoughts still arise, but there's no thinker to whom they belong. Emotions still flow, but there's no separate self to be overwhelmed by them. Drop one word in the comments below that captures the recognition you're moving into, your energetic signature to the quantum field. Let the community witness your shift. And if you're ready to stay aligned with this understanding, subscribe. Not just to stay connected, but to remain coherent with what you're discovering about the nature of consciousness itself. This isn't passive viewing. This is active frequency alignment. This is you declaring to the universe that you're done living as the illusion and ready to embody what you truly are. The recognition is here. The question is, are you ready to live from it? Most spiritual teachings stop at the philosophical understanding. They leave you with beautiful concepts, but zero practical framework for actually integrating this into your life. The truth is, recognizing yourself as awareness, rather than the one behind your eyes, doesn't mean floating in some blissful state of unity. It means discovering a new way to be human that's actually more functional, more responsive, more alive than identification with the separate self ever was. When you begin to live from the recognition that you are awareness itself, decision-making transforms completely. Instead of the ego mind frantically calculating outcomes and trying to control every variable, decisions begin to arise from a deeper intelligence. You start to notice that the right action often becomes obvious without overthinking it. Not because you've become passive or checked out, but because you've aligned with a wisdom that operates beyond the limitations of personal knowledge and fear. This isn't about suppressing the thinking mind. It's about recognizing that thinking is just one function among many in the field of consciousness. Like breathing or digestion, thinking happens automatically when needed. But it doesn't need to be micromanaged by some central controller. When you stop identifying as the thinker, thoughts actually become more clear, more focused, more appropriate to whatever situation you're in. The same transformation occurs with emotional experience. When you recognize that you are the space in which emotions arise, rather than the one who has emotions, your entire relationship with feeling shifts. Anger can burn through awareness without leaving any residue. Sadness can flow like rain through the sky of consciousness. Joy can sparkle through your being without the ego trying to grasp it or make it permanent. Emotions become weather patterns in awareness rather than personal storms you have to weather. This understanding also revolutionizes how you relate to other people's reactions and behaviors. When someone's angry with you, you can see that their anger is arising in the same field of consciousness you are. It's not really directed at you in the way the separate self imagines. It's consciousness expressing itself as temporary turbulence in the field of awareness.
Now, this doesn't mean you become a doormat or stop responding appropriately to situations. It means you can respond from clarity rather than reactivity, from presence rather than defensiveness. There's a huge difference.
Work and creative expression take on entirely new dimensions when you realize you're not the doer. Instead of forcing outcomes or struggling against resistance, you begin to move with the natural flow of intelligence expressing itself through your particular nervous system. This isn't about becoming lazy or uncommitted. It's about discovering what it's like to be an instrument through which life expresses itself, rather than a separate agent trying to make life happen. Many people worry that this recognition will make them indifferent or nihilistic. The opposite is actually true. When you see that you're not separate from anything appearing in your experience, compassion becomes automatic. The suffering of others is literally happening in the same awareness you are. There's no other to feel sorry for from a distance. There's just one consciousness experiencing itself as apparent multiplicity. recognizing its own pain and naturally moving to alleviate it. This is why truly awakened beings throughout history have been characterized by both profound peace and passionate engagement with life. They're not detached from the world. They recognize themselves as the world. They don't love others as separate beings. They love others as expressions of the same being they are. Action arises spontaneously from this recognition, not from personal agenda or spiritual ambition, but from the natural response of consciousness to its own apparent needs. Drop a comment if this is landing for you. Let me know where you're at with this understanding. But let's address something that often creates confusion in this exploration. If there's no separate self, who's reading these words right now? If there's no one behind your eyes, who's having this experience? This question reveals the persistence of dualistic thinking. It assumes there must be a subject and object, an experiencer and experienced. But what if experiencing is just happening without a separate entity doing the experiencing? Consider your night dreams. While dreaming, there seems to be a dream character having experiences in a dream world. The dreamer walks through dream landscapes, talks to dream people, feels dream emotions, but upon waking, you recognize that the entire experience, dreamer, dream world, dream interactions, was all happening in one consciousness. There was no separate dream character actually walking anywhere. There was just consciousness appearing as the totality of the dream experience. What if waking experience works the same way? What if the sense of being someone having experiences is actually consciousness appearing as the totality of experiencing itself? The you that seems to be reading these words is no more separate from the words or the reading than the dream character is separate from the dream. It's all one seamless movement of consciousness, knowing itself. This recognition doesn't diminish the richness or importance of experience. It reveals experience as even more intimate and immediate than you imagined. Instead of being a separate observer watching experience from a distance, you recognize yourself as the very fabric of experience itself. You're not having a life. You are life expressing itself as this particular pattern of knowing and being. When this truly lands, the search for meaning and purpose transforms completely. Instead of trying to figure out what you're supposed to do with your life, you begin to notice what life is trying to do through you. Instead of creating personal goals and forcing yourself toward them, you become available to serve the larger intelligence that's expressing itself as the unfolding of existence itself. Purpose becomes less about personal achievement and more about conscious participation in the evolution of consciousness. This shift often brings up fears about losing individuality or becoming some kind of spiritual zombie. But the opposite happens when you stop trying to maintain a fixed identity. Your natural uniqueness can actually shine more freely. The personality becomes more fluid, more responsive, more authentic. Instead of being trapped in habitual patterns of thought and behavior, you become available to fresh responses in each moment. Think about it. How much energy have you been spending trying to be a consistent you? Trying to maintain a certain image? Defending certain beliefs because they define who you are? When that drops away, all that energy becomes available for actually living. Have you noticed old patterns or reactions starting to loosen their grip on you lately? Drop a comment below about any shifts you're experiencing. This isn't just theoretical. People are having real breakthroughs with this understanding, and your sharing helps create a field where others can recognize the same freedom. The practical integration of this recognition isn't about perfecting some spiritual state. It's about discovering what becomes possible when you stop defending a fictional character and start living as the awareness that's always been here. That's when real transformation begins, not as a project of the ego, but as the natural unfolding of what you've always been. If you're ready to go deeper into the practical application of this understanding, make sure you're subscribed. Because what we're building here isn't just a channel. It's a frequency transmission that supports the dissolution of everything that's been keeping you trapped in the illusion of separation. These shared insights create powerful confirmation for others walking this same path of recognition. Think of it like this. When you're identified with the separate self, you're like a musician rigidly following sheet music, trying to play the same notes the same way every time. When you recognize yourself as awareness, you become like a jazz musician, still skilled and knowledgeable, but free to respond creatively to whatever arises in the moment, creating something beautiful that's never existed before and will never exist again in quite the same way. This creativity isn't limited to artistic expression. It infuses every aspect of life. Conversations become more spontaneous and authentic. Problem solving becomes more intuitive and elegant. Relationships become more intimate and free. Work becomes more effortless and effective. Life itself becomes a work of art being created moment by moment through consciousness, expressing itself as your unique perspective. The fear that you'll become boring or passive when you see through the illusion of the separate self reveals how little we actually trust the intelligence of consciousness itself. This is the same intelligence that orchestrates the dance of galaxies, coordinates the symphony of cellular activity in your body, and creates the exquisite complexity of ecosystems. Do you really think it's going to become dull and lifeless when it's allowed to express itself more freely through your nervous system? What actually happens is that life becomes more alive, more spontaneous, more responsive than it ever was when filtered through the limitations and fears of the separate self. You begin to discover capacities and qualities that were always present, but obscured by identification with the small story of me. Intuition becomes clearer. Love becomes more natural. Peace becomes your default state rather than something you have to achieve or maintain. And here's something beautiful that often emerges as this recognition stabilizes. You begin to see the absolute perfection of your entire life story, including all the parts you used to judge as mistakes or failures. From the perspective of the separate self, life often seems random, unfair, or meaningless. From the perspective of awareness itself, you begin to see that every experience, every relationship, every challenge was perfectly designed to bring you to this recognition of what you truly are. The difficulties you faced weren't obstacles to awakening. They were the very mechanism of awakening. The people who hurt you weren't impediments to your spiritual growth. They were unwitting teachers, showing you exactly where you were still identified with the separate self. The situations that felt impossible were actually perfect opportunities to discover the unlimited resourcefulness of consciousness itself. Comment below with one experience from your past that you're now seeing as a perfect teacher rather than a mistake. Let's witness this shift together. the story you've been carrying, that you are a solid self behind your eyes, a thinker generating thoughts, an agent controlling actions, was always more fragile than it appeared. Science, philosophy, and direct spiritual insight all converge on the same revolutionary recognition. The self is not what you believed it to be. You are not the one behind your eyes. You are the boundless awareness in which eyes, thoughts, bodies, and entire worlds appear and disappear. In that recognition, the boundaries that seem so solid begin to dissolve. What remains is not a smaller, more limited self, but the infinite witness, the ocean of consciousness recognizing itself in every drop, every wave, every temporary form it takes. The more of us who embody this understanding, the more the world reflects this deeper truth. This isn't just personal awakening. It's the emergence of a new way of being human, where consciousness recognizes itself as both the observer and the observed, both the witness and the witnessed, both the space and everything that appears within it. You are that recognition. You always have been. You always will be. The only thing that changes is whether you remember or forget this fundamental truth about what you are. And this remembering isn't a one-time event. It's an ongoing deepening, a continuous recognition that gets clearer and more stable with attention and practice. Some moments, the truth of what you are will be as obvious as the sky. Other moments, you'll get caught up in the story again, identified with thoughts and emotions as if they were solid and personal. This is completely natural and part of the process. The key is not to judge these fluctuations or try to maintain some perfect state of realization. The key is to recognize that even the forgetting happens in awareness. Even the identification with the separate self arises in the space of consciousness you are. There's no way to fall out of what you truly are. You can only temporarily overlook it. This is why spiritual practice becomes less about achieving something and more about remembering what's already true. Meditation isn't about creating a special state of consciousness. It's about recognizing the consciousness that's already present. Self-inquiry isn't about finding yourself. It's about seeing through the illusion of ever having been lost. Prayer isn't about reaching out to something separate from you. It's about recognizing the divine nature of awareness itself. As this understanding matures, you begin to see that everything in your experience, every thought, every sensation, every emotion, every relationship, every situation is actually a perfect reflection of consciousness knowing itself. The world stops feeling like something separate from you that you need to fix or escape, and starts feeling like your own being exploring itself in infinite variety. This doesn't mean you become passive or indifferent to suffering, yours or others. It means you begin to respond from a deeper place, from the recognition that all apparent suffering arises from the same fundamental misunderstanding, the belief in separation. Your very presence, embodying the truth of non-separation, becomes a healing force in the world. Your actions arise not from personal agenda, but from the natural response of consciousness to its own apparent needs. And perhaps most beautiful of all, you begin to see the same truth reflected everywhere, in the eyes of every person you meet. Behind every personality and story, the same awareness is shining. Every being you encounter is actually consciousness meeting itself, recognizing itself, celebrating itself through the dance of a parent interaction. Every moment becomes a revelation, every encounter a holy meeting, every experience a love letter from existence to itself. The more deeply this recognition settles, the more you see that what you call your spiritual journey was never about becoming something you weren't. It was about recognizing what you've always been. The awareness reading these words right now is the same awareness that was present in your earliest childhood memory. It's the same awareness that will be present in your final breath. It has never changed, never been absent, never been disturbed by any of the experiences that have appeared within it. This awareness is your true face, your original nature, your deepest identity. Not the changing content of experience, but the unchanging space in which all content appears and disappears. Not the temporary forms consciousness takes, but consciousness itself, infinite, eternal, ever-present, absolutely free. Consider rewatching this exploration regularly, perhaps each morning to anchor this recognition as you begin your day. Or share this understanding with someone who's been seeking deeper truth. Because when we transmit these frequencies of awareness, we strengthen the field for everyone. Each person who recognizes their true nature creates an energetic ripple that accelerates awakening throughout the collective. Your own understanding deepens through this act of sharing, creating synchronicities and openings you couldn't imagine from the separate self's perspective. Hit that share button right now, not as a favor to me, but as an act of service to consciousness itself, recognizing itself through others. Once you truly grasp that you are not the one behind your eyes, but the awareness in which all experience appears, you're positioned to see how consciousness literally shapes reality through the act of observation. The quantum implications of what we've explored today reveal that you're far more powerful than you've been conditioned to believe. And that's exactly what we're diving into next. Make sure you're subscribed because this understanding is about to get practical in ways that will transform how you create your reality. This isn't theory anymore. This is the mechanics of manifestation from the level of pure consciousness. I'll see you in the next one.